Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
I'm Jenna Brown.
I'm Kevin Tumlinson.
And I'm JD Barker. Welcome to Writers Inc. I am reporting live from Disney World, so I'm guessing I sound weird.
You're a little low in volume, but otherwise you sound pretty good.
Yeah,
Yeah, I've got all
fine.
my travel gear hooked up, and like I'm afraid to touch anything because it's actually working right now.
I've had to do that quite a bit where you've got like can your laptop's balanced on a stack of
Uh-huh.
whatever was in the room,
Yeah,
It's like the
precariously.
Jenga of podcasting.
Yep.
Yeah.
All
Well,
right.
How's
how is
Disney?
it? Is it a small world after all, JD?
Dude, I've told you guys how my memory works, right? Like being autistic,
Mhm.
my memory is very weird. So like everything that I remember feels like it just happened 5 minutes ago. So when I come to places like Disney World, like I can tell you I've been on the It's a Small World ride 18 times in my life. And like I literally remember all 18 times while I'm on there, which is very surreal when I'm sitting next to my 7-year-old daughter, experiencing it for the first time. But it
Yeah.
is that song is just as annoying now as it was the very first time I heard it. And it gets stuck
Yeah.
in your head. It's crazy. My daughter and I have been having some fun though. I'm sorry I missed last week, but we were in New York. I had to do a bunch of press and she actually got to be on the radio on Sirius XM. I'm trying to find out when it's gonna air.
That's
That's
But
cool.
it was
so
really cool. Yeah,
fun.
they put her on the air, so she got the special treatment.
That is cool.
Um, got
Oh,
got to see Howard Stern's door. Apparently he doesn't come in anymore. He does everything from his house in the Hamptons, which who wouldn't?
Of
right.
course.
I mean,
Yeah.
why not? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, but it was a fun trip. She I don't even know how she heard about this, but she found someplace called the Museum of Ice Cream. So like it was literally
Wow.
you walk in $50 a person to get through the door. And they give you ice cream in every room.
Oh
And
my
and, and
gosh.
they,
Okay.
they told
I
that
mean,
it's
that's
unlimited
worth
ice
it.
cream. So like
Also
every
known as the Museum of Diabetes.
yeah, so like
Yeah.
every room is themed. So like one room will be like candy cane colored and like you get candy cane ice cream, then you go to another room and it's something else and it's something else. The very last room, you take a slide from the top of this building all the way down to the basement. It's like a spiral slide that goes through the whole building. And there's a swimming pool down there that's filled with sprinkles. So you
Oh,
can literally
My,
just jump into a swimming pool of fake sprinkles. So
what?
it's like a kid's dream. And then if you still haven't
Oh,
had enough ice cream on the way out the door, they've got a full bar for the adults and they've got an ice cream bar for the kids. So you just hang out until you're ready to go. So I
Until
think I'm
everyone
done with ice
goes
cream for like
into
the
a
next 10 years.
for like
that's
10
sugar
a
coma.
That sounds amazing though.
Yeah,
so
Next
not
time I'm in New
one
York,
thing
I'm
you
going.
because you weren't here, JD, we didn't get to talk about the whole how the writer did on the New York Times list and how it
Yeah,
got
no, I,
there.
I saw that in our notes and like I know I sent you guys the numbers, but did anybody write it down?
I remember because I'm
It was
stupid
it
with
was like six
numbers.
it was 16,000 and change, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
just over 16,000, which was less than what Onyx Storm sold, which was at number one, which I just
No, no,
find
it
wild.
was more. We sold
Oh yeah,
2,000
that's I
more.
mean I meant yeah, I said the wrong thing. Onyx Storm
Yeah,
was less than
Yeah,
that.
so what we're trying to communicate here is that the writer sold it was 16,000, I think 380 copies if I remember right, or
Yeah.
580, something like that, hardcover, which was 2,000 more than Onyx Storm, but she still got the number one spot on the New York Times list. We took number two. But if you look at any other list, we were number one because if you base it solely on sales for hardcovers, we beat everybody. So I guess it just goes, like nobody knows how the New York Times does it. She's been number one since January when that book came out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that means that a lot of people probably should have been number one, if you based it on sales and they missed it, since
Yeah.
January at every one of those lists.
I
So
I
Yeah.
I think it's going to have at least something to do with where those sales happen and in what order at different
Well, yeah,
locations.
the New York
And
Times, I mean, don't they sort of always say is that like they only count sales from specific places, but they won't tell you what those places are.
yeah.
So,
well, the places will tell you. Like if you go into a bookstore and you ask them, they'll tell you whether they're a New York Times reporting store. I've
yeah,
got a list somewhere of all of them. Because
but
those are the ones I try to visit. Those are the ones that book the
yeah,
tours.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but
That's
yeah,
where
no,
they all the gaming happens too, because like the publishers will actually send people out to
Mhm.
go pre-order like, 200 copies or something and never pick them up
well,
just to gain the list.
that
Well,
used to be a whole thing where,
Yeah.
yeah, they would go out and they would buy 10,000 copies and they would spread it out through all these different stores that, like there were businesses based on that. You send this company X dollars and they'll hit all these stores around the country to buy them. But that's been like they've figured that model out a long time
Yeah.
ago, and
Yeah.
Don't
somehow
they
they
have
figured
like,
it
there's a little mark. It usually happens in nonfiction because like conferences and stuff, but there will be like a mark if if they reached the sales threshold to hit the list based on bulk sales. It's like an
Hmm.
upside down cross, which I don't know why they chose that symbol, but it's
I
something
can
like
guess.
that.
Where do they put that?
Send it to you. If you look at the nonfiction list, you'll see it. It'll have a little mark. And if you look at the very
Oh,
bottom, it'll say it made the list based on bulk sales. Because a lot of those nonfiction people will do like conferences and stuff,
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah,
So,
it's a whole different world. Yeah, like Tony
yeah,
Robbins walks into a stadium
right.
somewhere and he sells
Oh,
like
I've heard this one. No.
Yeah, I don't know if they do the same mark for fiction or how they do that, but I know that they do that with nonfiction.
huh.
Yeah.
Well, all right, so
All
there it
right.
is.
So we still know nothing.
We
Right.
know nothing. Yeah,
We
That's
may actually even know less than when we started. So
correct.
I've got no
uh
visibility on the ebooks or any other formats, so I don't know what we sold there.
Yeah.
all
So,
right,
all right.
well, we should probably get to the news then. Playing with words, why novelists are becoming video game writers and vice versa. Novelists are increasingly venturing into video game writing due to financial motivations and creative opportunities, while game writers explore novel writing for expanded narrative expression and stability in earnings. A 2022 report found that professional authors earn a median of $9,000 a year, pushing them to seek supplementary income through game writing. Conversely, with layoffs affecting game writers, some look toward novel writing as a viable alternative. The disparity in cultural status between books and games often influences writers' experiences and public perception, with books generally culturally valued, while video games aren't, despite the significant creative effort involved in game writing. Novelist Naomi Alderman, author of The Power, had a week in which both her novel The Power and her game Zombies Run won awards. The award for her book made the papers, while the Zombies Run award barely made the specialist games press. I have a lot of friends who are game writers and novelists, um, and this pretty much sums up why. And their ambitions really usually your ambition is to do one or the other, and you end up doing both because it's kind of a I don't know, it's a workaround to make income,
Yeah,
which
it's lucrative, right? Like the
yeah,
ones that I know, they're doing it. That's their day job to offset their writing hobby until the writing hobby gets to the point where it can pay the bills.
yeah,
But it's writing adjacent, which is nice. You're not
yeah.
flipping burgers or waiting tables somewhere. At least you're doing something creative.
Honestly, my problem with it, with the game industry, for writers is it's nearly identical to the marketing and advertising agency model, which is basically just slave labor. I mean,
Yeah.
there are horrible conditions for ultimately very little pay for the number of hours you put in.
Yeah. It's basically the office job, right? Versus,
Yeah.
yeah. And it was interesting though, when I was reading this article, they said last year, 1 in 5 video game writers were laid off. So they're trying to write
Yeah.
novels. I think everybody who is a writer as a profession needs to have various streams to make more. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of us need to have various streams
This
to
is why I sell
income.
crack cocaine.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
it's
my
a garage hobby.
Yeah.
Oh
All
boy.
right. Final story. Let me rewind my brain here a little. It's cynical, manipulative, and cruel. Amazon's decision to schedule its second annual book sale during the same week as Independent Bookstore Day has sparked accusations of deliberate competition and insensitivity. Independent booksellers and industry leaders expressed skepticism about Amazon's claim that the overlap was unintentional, with some suggesting it's a cynical move to undermine businesses during one of their most significant sales events of the year. Amazon's ability to offer significant discounts, as much as 65% off hardcovers and 80% off ebooks, presents a difficult challenge to independent bookstores that cannot compete on price and rely instead on providing personalized customer experiences and the value of community over cost savings. Yeah, I can
I'm
see
pretty
it.
sure it was a dick move, right?
Yeah.
So there's
Amazon
no other
doing
way
what
to look at
Amazon
it.
does.
Amazon.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the great thing about the independent side of this is we have more flexibility. So what you can do is just do a sudden announcement at the end that we're extending it through the end of June or whatever, and let those cards fall where they may. We can pivot faster and do more. That's
Yeah.
that's our defense.
I just have to say the last line of this article was hilarious, and I'm not going to read it on the air. But if you're curious, you can go read it.
Well, I'm clicking that now. I did look it up.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh, see, he's laughing.
Hey, this is Kevin Tumlinson, and it seems to me like you might need a little help. Maybe hand off all that stuff that's keeping you from writing. At Author Anchor, we connect authors with skilled, affordable virtual assistants trained specifically for the publishing world. Your personal VA handles everything from book production to marketing and social media, freeing you up to focus on what matters most, your writing. Book a discovery call today and we'll find that perfect VA for you. Plus, mention the Writers Inc. podcast and you'll get $50 off your first month. Visit authoranchor.com and get matched with your personal VA so you can just write.
All right,
Yeah,
with that,
that's
JD, who's up this week?
This week we've got Sarina Bowen coming on. Sarina holds a BA in finance from Yale. She's a former Wall Street trader, and she's also a USA Today bestselling author. Her latest novel is called Dying to Meet You and releases May 13th. Here she is, Sarina Bowen.
We had a conversation just before this show started. Two things that the listeners should know is that one, here in Austin, we're having like severe wind. So you may hear rattling from my windows every now and then. I'll try to mute that as much as possible. And two, we were talking about Sarina Bowen's new book, Dying to Meet You, coming out May 18th, available for pre-order right now. But we were talking about the cover. Sarina, you have a lighthouse on your cover, but there's no lighthouse in the book. How'd that happen?
Well, there's a lot of things on this cover, though. There's an angry ocean and an old house, and the
Yeah.
book is set in Portland, Maine, which is one of my favorite places in the world. And it's an old house figures prominently into the story. And, it's a little hard for when an author comes up with an old house that an architect is redoing in the book. So like there's a description of it, and then some poor cover designer has to go match
Right.
a cover with this thing that I've dreamt up. So I
Right.
think they're just doing their best, but I love the drama of this cover, and so when I saw it, I knew that it was good.
Yeah, it's got a great look, and nothing says Maine like a lighthouse on a turbulent shore.
A turbulent shore, that's right. We don't do pristine, quiet, sandy beaches in New England.
Is that where you are? Are you in Maine?
I'm one state over in New Hampshire,
Okay.
where we have exactly 14 miles of coastline anywhere, and we're very jealous of the coastline that Maine has.
Yeah. Yeah, my wife and I spent some time hanging out in Portland when we were doing van life. We got to have some oceanfront property for about 3 weeks. So
Cool.
that was interesting.
It's such a great spot in the world.
Yeah. So what is there? That setting clearly is connected to the story in some way. So how does your setting factor into the story?
Well, like I said, I love Portland, and it's got this little bit of magic, which is that it's still an active seaport town, but it doesn't look like Elizabeth, New Jersey. Like it's not just all industrial. It's a working port. It's got really old architecture, and Portland is a little bit smug about it. It's just such a cool spot in the world. And the main character is an architect, and she is responsible for a huge renovation going on in an old family mansion that was built in the 19th century. So Portland, of course, I needed a place that would have a 19th century, shipping magnate's home.
Yeah.
As for her to take care of. And, it all came together. The story, the town, the moodiness of the place.
Yeah.
We like a little drama with our thrillers, right?
Right. Yeah. And this is so there's a murder mystery afoot. Plus your main character ends up being basically framed, right?
Well, yes, but she also kind of frames herself, doesn't she? She's in her 40s. She hadn't had a real relationship in years. She's a single mom to a teenage girl, and she has just been dumped by this guy she was seeing. And she thought that, things were going pretty well, and then he suddenly dumps her via text message. It's just terrible. And she's more angry than heartbroken. She's so angry that, he forgot that he shared his location with her. So she's been following him around Portland,
Right.
watching him go out every night. And he's like, who did he go to that restaurant with? Which movie is he seeing?
Yeah.
And, she should probably deal with this in a more healthy way, like, ice cream and rom-coms or something. But she's basically digitally stalking him, even though, she wouldn't have called it that, until this one night when she gets really fed up because he's parked in their spot where they used to sit and watch the sky turn pink over the water. And she's like, I have to know who else is in that car. So she leashes up the dog and they go out for a walk, and she finds the car and he's dead.
These are those not a new premise entirely, in that so the main character stumbles onto someone and gets blamed for the murder. But one of the twists I like about this is the sort of modern day take on stalking, because
Right.
you couldn't have written this story 20 years ago or so. I don't know when they invented the Find My iPhone or whatever.
Right.
But that's kind of an interesting. What made you decide to kind of go that route?
Well, so I was not acquainted with this app and its many talents until a few years ago when my teenage son got an e-bike.
Okay.
Which meant that suddenly his skinny body was like on our country roads on this bicycle going far too fast for my taste to go, 7 miles to soccer practice. And I used to really just spend a lot of time thinking, like, I hope he got there okay.
Yeah.
And so I would look at his location. And by the way, the book is dedicated to my sons. Thank you for sharing your location with me so that I could think up the creepy premise of this book.
Right.
And but it really, that's the job, right? You look at this app, you're using it for a perfectly nice reason, and your brain says, what's the worst thing that could happen here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I really do like the fact that you couldn't have written this story 20 years ago.
Yeah.
We live in a world with so much more technology following us around, and I think that stuff is wildly entertaining, and I am happy that it has made its way into our fiction.
Yeah. Those are good questions that writers can ask. I think that, what would happen if, do you find that a lot of your stories kind of come from inspirations like that?
Absolutely. And before I learned to write a thriller this way, I did sort of have my finger on who is bringing these modern fears into their fiction efficiently. For example, Harlan Coben has been doing a good job of this for like 20 years or 30 years, where he finds something that's very much in the moment. His book, Tell No One, he has the heroine looks into a camera, like a street cam.
Yeah.
And kicks off the book that way. So it's something that I'm just tuned to.
Yeah.
I read Wired magazine religiously because I'm interested in how these things work. Yeah. So I'm tuned into that. That's how it makes its way into the premises of the books I write.
Do you find yourself sort of always on in that way? Like, when you're reading an article, watching a show, or whatever, are you always sort of in the back of your head, at least thinking, like, I wonder if I could use that?
Kind of, but I had to really train myself to think like that.
Yeah.
But once you turn that on, you can't turn it off. And
right.
But of course, I'm always seeing things where they've done such an amazing job at it in other fiction that I don't, that I don't even think about it that way. Like I just enjoyed a show called The Capture,
Mm-hmm.
which is a British, 2 seasons of a British police slash spy thriller with main main heroine Holiday Granger
Yeah.
as the actor. And it was very cutting edge in terms of camera work and technology, and tech drives the whole plot. And I watched both seasons and thought, oh my goodness, they really killed it.
Yeah. Yeah. The British do a great job with shows like that, by the way.
Yeah.
I find my wife especially, she watches a lot of British TV. I watch a lot because of her. But yeah, I'm finding those are interesting stories. So this is you a lot of your work has not been in the thriller genre, right? Like
That's
you
right.
wrote romance and other books. What was
Yeah.
what kind of prompted, did you transition completely out of writing romance, or you just decided one day, I'd like to write some murder mysteries?
You know, the thing about our curiosity in any given genre is that it's not limitless.
Yeah.
When I started writing romance, I had a lot of curiosity about certain kinds of plot lines. And then since I wrote so deeply into romance over a decade, I I sort of burned through some of my curiosities.
Yeah.
And I'm a very analytical person, so plot-driven fiction appeals to me generally, and that's how I kind of landed on suspense as my next trick. Like I couldn't have just turned to anything.
Yeah.
Fantasy, for example, my brain just doesn't bend that way.
Yeah.
But suspense makes a lot of sense to me. Like I like how grounded in reality it has to be to make sense, and I just really enjoy picking it apart.
Yeah. What do you find are the key differences between the two genres, other than the obvious stuff? I mean, what's different between writing a thriller and writing a romance story?
Um, well, the main difference I have found is empathy. So
Mm,
both genres make a promise to the reader.
right.
Romance makes the promise that there will be a satisfying romantic conclusion, and suspense makes the promise that whatever mess and confusion you've delivered in chapter one will have a satisfying explanation by the end. And a lot of suspense, a shocking amount of it, honestly, is written for characters that you're not actually supposed to like.
Yeah.
And I kind of don't function that way. Like, I want you to be rooting for my character immediately. Like, even if she's flawed, even if she makes some really bad choices, she's still worth rooting for. And
Yeah.
a lot of suspense doesn't function that way, which is totally fine. It's just that that is not how mine works because I don't want to spend that much time with people who aren't worthy.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah, because that is what it's like. I think that's kind of, I don't know if that's a downside or something. I don't know. But I have that hang up too. Like I don't want to write 300 plus
Yeah,
pages with somebody that I don't like,
right.
So
And I feel like in my mind, there's like a clear divide between the books where you're not supposed to like anybody or the books where you're not sure until like page 200 if you like them. And then the authors who want you to empathize from the beginning. Like I mentioned Harlan Coben a few minutes
yeah,
ago. He always gives you somebody to root for immediately.
right.
You're never not sure about
Yeah,
the main character.
yeah,
And Claire McIntosh is someone who I really enjoy as well. And she also gives you, you're supposed to be rooting for her character, even if she's acting like a fool.
yeah. Do you think that connects the reader to the character better if they're someone that they like and would hang out with?
Well, if you look at what's selling, it's not always true. I mean, there's
Yeah,
a lot of books selling a lot of copies the books are written about people that you wouldn't want to spend time with.
Right.
So, and those books are clever. Like their readers are there for something else. Their readers are there to either hate watch them or just to, because the mystery is that compelling.
Yeah.
But I just found that I don't function well in it with a story unless I know who I'm rooting for immediately. And that's how I find, the fortitude to, make these messes and try to clean them up.
Yeah. Do you think that makes it easier or more difficult to build the tension for that character?
I don't know if I've sorted it that way.
Yeah.
I mean, to me it's easier because when stuff starts to go bad, like I just care more.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you do, it's probably reasonable to assume the reader does, right?
Right. And that's
Yeah.
all we can do, right? Is all we can do is tell a story that we ourselves would like to read.
Yeah. So because you like that character so much though, do you find it difficult to put them in those harrowing situations?
Oh, definitely. Oh, it's the hardest. And I would admit that is a thing that I struggle with. Like almost always I have to go back and do more and
Yeah.
be worse and make it worse. That's just, how it works for me.
Yeah.
I just enjoyed the latest in the Orphan X series by
Oh,
Greg
yeah.
Hurwitz.
Yeah.
And that character is such a fantastic example.
Mhm.
We really care what happens to him, even from the first chapter of the first book.
Yeah.
And it's such a masculine, action-driven series. It's gory, it's violent, like all kinds of crazy stuff happens. But he does the emotional arc so well. And I always forget that. Like when I look at the book sitting on my shelf, I think like, oh, that's a macho
Mhm.
action-driven bloodfest. But then when you open the pages, like a shocking amount of attention is given to how Orphan X feels. So that's obviously why I like it so much.
Yeah. Yeah. That's yeah, I've interviewed him. I've read his work. I love everything he does. Uh Very exciting stuff, Do you feel
Mhm.
is that the kind of thing you're aiming for with your characters and your stories? Are you trying to reach that sort of level of action? Is there a balance between the action and you know, the feel good of the character, I guess?
Well, you can't take just any book to the level that he takes that character. I
Yeah.
mean, we're literally dealing with a secret ops,
Yeah.
um, trained
Little
killer.
different than stalking your ex on their iPhone, I guess.
Yeah, like we have to have high stakes in all of our books or they just won't be worth the trouble.
Yeah.
But not everybody can be a trained assassin and reach that level of
Yeah.
drama.
Or
So
can they? So okay, you let's talk a little bit about your sort of career path here. Like how long have you actually been writing and publishing?
well, for over a decade, but
Okay.
I have been writing in series up until now anyway. And so that's, those books are faster to write and faster to publish.
Yeah. Yes, that's true. Less, you don't have to spend quite as much time world building
That's right.
per book.
It's
You're doing it.
efficient.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, what, how'd you get to that point? What made you decide that writing was going to be the thing?
Oh, well, I'd always wanted to, and I had a false start before this current iteration of my career. And I just, it's the only kind of marathon I run is that
Yeah.
I seem to understand how novels are paced and be able um, to stick through one of them.
Right.
And, we're all just have I just spent so much time figuring out how novels are put together that, that's where I landed. If you asked me to
Yeah.
write a screenplay, I couldn't do it.
Yeah. So what was your training for that marathon? How did you, determine how novels are or should be put together?
Well, just like a lot of novelists, I
Yeah.
was not trained to do this. I went to a very elite college where I took exactly zero writing classes because I was intimidated, and I knew that the genre fiction that was interesting to me is not what they were working on. I mean, maybe I was wrong about that. Like,
Yeah.
maybe I could have done a lot and been very satisfied with that. But I am, like many novelists, self-trained, but
Mhm.
also super curious and have over time developed, a pretty deep vocabulary for how we break down our own work and how we fix things, and the various theories of how novels are put together and how they tick. And I enjoy that part of the process, honestly. It's interesting to me.
What do you think is like a primary core secret to a novel actually being good?
Well, sometimes when I feel a novel miss the mark, it's often because they don't quite understand how you really have to, the main character has to change from the beginning of the book to the
Yeah.
end. That's a common issue.
But you said something interesting because, you talked about the character base, and this is something we know. We learn this as writers that the characters need to change from beginning to end.
Mhm.
That's what we call story. But does that same rule apply when you're writing series? I mean, how much does your character
Absolutely.
change?
Well, okay, so many of the series that I've written are in the same setting, like among the same family or among the
Hmm.
same team, and it's different characters. So
Okay.
book two would actually be somebody else learning some different lesson, but that's not always the case. You can I learn things all the time that make me a different person in March than I was in January. So it's possible to, break and rebuild character arcs in a
Yeah.
series of books, or, have a big character arc over a series.
Yeah.
Another thing that I had to learn as a novelist was how to be really efficient on the page. Every scene is accomplishing multiple things.
Mm, yeah.
And that's hard to figure out over time. But
How do
yeah,
you figure it out? Do you outline, by the way? Are you an outliner?
I am a, a quasi outliner.
Okay.
I would never just dive into a book without knowing where I was going. That seems way too anxiety producing for me. So I always thought of myself as an outliner. But then I collaborated on a book a long time ago now with a lovely TV writer named Sarah Mayberry,
Mm,
and she is an outliner. So, there are various shades of gray in terms
yeah.
of what constitutes being somebody who plans ahead. But I really like to know where I'm going. I like to know what my character has to learn. I feel like
Yeah.
that's one of the first things that you have to establish about a novel so that you don't waste a lot of time learning how she works
Mm,
as you're trying to develop the plot at the same time. I feel like that would be really difficult.
yeah. So so how do you then figure out how to layer the things that a scene does? Like, do you work that out in advance in that quasi outline, or is that something you kind of figure out on an edit pass? How do you do it?
Well, sometimes it is an edit pass thing, but if you know what the small um the small goals and the big goals have to kind of
Yeah.
slide together a little bit. So if in the first chapter of a book I'm introducing a character and I need the reader to know where this book is set, like
Yeah.
what is going on here in this room, where are we? You don't just describe the room. You're describing the room through that character's opinions about everything.
Mm,
And their opinion about that footstool is more important than what it actually looks like. Like we need to give the character, or I'm sorry, we need to give the reader a setting so that they don't feel like the book is floating in space.
Yeah.
But if you don't do that in a very opinionated way, then you've squandered the opportunity. Like it's more interesting to read about a setting if it comes to you shaded through the deep opinions of the person
Yeah.
whose
Yeah.
viewpoint you're exploring.
Yeah.
You know, you can get a lot of voice and a lot of intention just from what's happening in the kitchen.
Right. Yeah. Is there a danger there then of, you know, because you're describing that footstool, you know, and maybe one of your motives is to give some characterization, and while also describing the room, but do you run any danger of like, you know, what if that footstool isn't actually important to the scene, but you're overemphasizing it? I mean, is that something you deal with?
Well, you just have to choose wisely,
Yeah.
you know. If
Choose a
it's a
different
knife,
footstool.
right, or choose
Yeah.
a knife, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. That's the whole shotgun thing, right? You know, you introduce a shotgun in the first act, it has to go off in the final act,
Right.
something like that.
But even if it wasn't a gun, it could be a desk. And where did it come from? Like, is it a family
Right.
heirloom? Did
Right.
it come from IKEA because your character has no family at all? Like, you know, you can just
Oh, see you.
accomplish.
Yeah. You just
Yeah.
yeah, you just did it right there live.
Yeah.
Kind of used an object to tell two different versions of same person's story. That's interesting.
Right.
Very
I
skilled of you.
heard I heard a wonderful speech about this by a novelist named Kristen Higgins,
Hmm.
and she gave an entire talk about setting, and she did it by describing a church.
Okay.
Um, and she gave a description of this church in two different passes, and they were two very different, you know, story beginnings. You know, one of them was we're going into this church for a funeral, and the other one we're going into the church for a wedding. So, you know, it was a great little class on how to be efficient in your book description. Because the
Yeah.
truth is, I don't really like to describe anything. Like if you let me, I would just write the whole book in dialogue. So I have to be very opinionated in my description because
and
that to
yet
me
and
is the
yet you're
boring
afraid
part.
to do a screenplay.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know how to do it. A
Yeah.
screenplay requires other efficiencies that I don't understand. So
Yeah. Is that something you're interested in at all, or is that just outside the scope of what you want to do?
it's pretty much outside the scope, but I have noticed with authors that if they tell you on Tuesday, like I am not interested in that thing or I'll never do that thing, then like it sort of follows you around and bothers you. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like there are tropes in romance that I declared myself completely uninterested in ever writing. And then, you know, a month later, you're like, oh, wait.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that don't think of pink elephants thing, you know.
Yeah.
That's exactly why I'm currently working on the side. I'm working on like a memoir because everybody keeps kind of suggesting it and pushing my brain to it, even though I never wanted to write a memoir. So we'll see how that
Yeah.
turns out.
Yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
the thing. Like, I never want to write a memoir either because I think it would possibly be very dull.
Yeah.
But
That's my
but
worry
who
too.
knows?
Yeah. But you know, I mean, it's just like anything else, though, right? Like let's loop back and talk about, you know, you're talking about describing the setting through the characters' opinions of various objects or whatever. I mean, that's a storytelling tool, right? So you can make almost anything interesting
You,
if
you
you color it
can
the right way. Yeah.
if you are dedicated. Yes.
Yeah. How dedicated do you want to be? That's the
Right.
question. So you've made one pivot in your career, genre wise. Are you considering any other genres to kind of dip your toes in?
Um, no, but I'm sure you know as well that like even within the suspense genre, there's just so much
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
There are so many story ideas that um, have been done so many times before, but not by me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they all feel fresh to me. So I feel like I could, you know, keep going for quite a long time.
Yeah. You got one in progress right now?
Absolutely. And it is another fun premise that would not have made sense 25 years ago.
Isn't that interesting? Like
Yeah.
and I think that's the key, right? Because you kind of hit on it. There aren't really any news stories.
Right.
Like in my genre, like I write historical and archaeological thrillers mostly,
Mhm.
and every single one of us has written a book about Atlantis or about, a Mayan tomb, but it doesn't matter that it's been written before. It's what's our take on it that matters. That's what's important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And also sometimes, especially with suspense, I find that I'll have an idea for something,
Hmm.
but I won't know enough about it. And then I'll have another idea over here, but I won't know enough about that. And sometimes maybe all of the suspense titles I've ever cared to write have have functioned by bringing two of those things together.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
takes me a really long time to figure out how that setup and that plot are supposed to interact.
Yeah. Yeah. What's your research process like?
Oh, well, like many authors, I really enjoy the research, and I will often need to go out and interview people. Um,
Okay.
for this book, for the Dying to Meet You, I took an architect out to lunch because I needed to know how she would look at this project
Yeah.
and what made sense. I didn't want to write it to be um, something that wouldn't hold water with an architect. And then because this is an active murder investigation, I found a retired police detective in Maine to
Okay.
help me
Andy.
get that part right. Yes, there's this lovely guy, Tim Cotton. He's also a writer. He, for years, among many other jobs, he was responsible for the Bangor, Maine Facebook police page for his department.
Okay.
And every one of those entries was like gut holding funny. The things that he would say, okay, 4th of July coming, here's how we're not going to blow our fingers off this year. Like they're just so funny. And so when I needed to talk to somebody in law enforcement in Maine, like he was my first stop. I'm like, hi, you don't
Oh,
know me. I
yeah.
love everything you've ever written on that social media feed. Could you help me handle this murder investigation in a way that isn't completely wrong? And he
Yeah.
did. It was so lovely.
That's excellent. And I think that's the way you went to that is excellent advice, I think. To go find the things that you're paying attention to and then approach the people who created them. Those are good sources. So,
Absolutely. There's this woman, she is a professor of psychology at, I believe, the University of Iowa. Her name is Jennifer Lynn Barnes. She also
yeah.
writes New York Times best-selling young adult fiction,
Yeah.
and she writes about uh, authorship and fandoms. And one of the things that she has is an id list, meaning like what are those things that she's always paying attention to that she really likes in her fiction. Like she said, her characters always end up on a rooftop because she really likes rooftops and she really likes ice cream and just these things that push our buttons that are always interesting to us. So I started paying attention to what kinds of news stories do I always read.
Yeah.
And I told you I read Wired magazine cover to cover, and I
Yeah.
will click on any article about a dog who had to go 300 miles to find its owner. And I will click on any article about um, a painting that somebody found in their attic that was really Picasso, or
Yeah.
an art heist, or documents recovered after 600 years. There's just certain triggers that I have that I'm always interested in that story. And
Yeah.
if I stay true to those things when I'm crafting my own books, it works out well for everybody.
That is again excellent. That's an excellent piece of advice to kind of follow where your interests are as your means of research. So
Yeah, someone
Well,
else will care.
that's good. Well, we're at time, so I need to wrap up. But I'm looking forward to I haven't yet gotten an advanced copy of this, but that's okay. I think I'm going to go ahead and buy it on Kindle so I can read it when it's out. But the book is Dying to Meet You. It's releasing May 13th, and it's on pre-order right now. So
Yeah. And thank you so
exciting.
much.
You're welcome. Thank you for being a part of the show.
My pleasure.
Well, sorry. I'm reading the last sentence of that article over and over again.
You're
It's that
welcome.
meaningful to me. So Serena said her curiosity and romance started to kind of fade, which pushed her toward writing suspense. Have you ever felt like your curiosity in a genre has started to dry up, and what have you done to switch gears?
I already bounce around, and I think that's what helps keep
I
that
think
from
that's
happening.
helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, I think everybody kind of needs to do that because the people that I do know that get stuck writing that same book over and over again, they do get burnt out on it. And the flip side of that coin, unfortunately, is your audience gets larger and larger because you are writing that same book over and over again, which makes it harder to step away and do something different. So, I try to mix it up, and I've been doing it from the get-go.
See, and I think you are a little like Stephen King in that you are writing multiple genres. You're writing cross genre, but you're doing it kind of under an umbrella of one type of like thriller is kind of the umbrella. And I know that there's some people who are mad about that, but I do the same thing. I write a little bit of sci-fi, a little bit of archaeological thriller, technological thriller in it, but it's all kind of under one umbrella, and so I'm able to push it out to the same audience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
I
written
mean,
too many. Like the very first book I wrote was steampunk, and then I wrote hard sci-fi, and then horror, and then thriller.
yeah,
But
What do
I,
you prefer?
you're branching out a little too far. Like
yeah, I was like,
you
now I've
need
got
to
to
write.
do thriller
You
that
need
has spec in it, and that's
Yeah,
or not, and that's good.
you got to stay adjacent. And like
Yep.
what I found is, at the very beginning, my agent pushed back on it, but she sold them anyway. Publishers didn't want to do it, but they started to buy them anyway. And now I'm starting to see it on the foreign side. So like in Spain, for example, I sell a ton of copies. But up until about a year and a half, 2 years ago, they only bought my thriller. So anytime I did something that wasn't a thriller, they just skipped over it. But this year they circled back and they bought up all the ones that they haven't published yet, and they're starting to put those out too. So like even they're coming around. So it's kind
yeah,
of one of those things like you have to stick to your guns and force the issue. And if you do it right, it does work. But if a lot of people cave. It would have been very easy to cave for me, because I could have easily written, thrillers the whole time and probably brought in a lot more income from it. But then I would be pigeonholed too, so you have to kind of play the long game, I guess. You have to
yeah.
try and figure out where you want to be.
Yeah.
Do you
And
think that's why some of these authors start bringing in like ghostwriters?
Yeah, I think they get
probably.
bored and they just don't want to do it
Yeah,
themselves anymore. I mean, look at Lee Child. I mean,
yeah,
fantastic author. But like he basically stepped away from the Jack Reacher books, and if his brother wouldn't have stepped up, Jack Reacher would be gone.
yeah,
And if you look at Amazon, like Lee's been putting stuff out. Like he put out a short story about 2 months ago. He's writing, it's still thrillers, but like he's branching out into things that aren't Jack Reacher.
yeah.
So it happens to the best of them.
Jenna, I think we cut you off.
Oh, it's fine. I'm used to it. Just kidding. I think it can kind of be a fun game though. I mean, like if you learn how to sort of blend the genres a little bit, like JD was talking about, like they can kind of veer, but they kind of stay not too far away. It kind of becomes then fun of like what elements can you add to this next book that can keep your current readers happy, but maybe attract some new ones. Like, I don't know, I kind of like to think of how to do that in a way that is fun and makes sense to keep things interesting for me.
Yeah,
So when I get an idea that I write down, like a lot of it starts in a contemporary world, but then inevitably other things are added to it, which kind of keep it similar but different.
I think
yeah,
in general, if you can keep your stories based in reality, keep them grounded so they seem plausible, you can get away with it in just about any genre. Like
Yeah, yeah,
you can throw a dragon into a book as long as its origin it seems 100% plausible. Like you
right.
could turn on the TV and see it on the news right now. It's the same thing with, like if you write straight up horror, like a lot of things you get away with, you're not going to get away with writing a thriller. But you
Right.
could write a thriller and throw in those horror elements if you come up with a really good reason for zombies to exist. You can make it happen.
Yeah, I think those are the best crossover books too, when it's
Yeah.
like it's still very concrete, but you kind of add some other elements to it. So it makes it recognizable for the reader, which is what you want. You want them to be comfortable stepping into that world, no matter what world it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you guys ever use like modern technology or cultural trends in your work?
I
Yes.
did pretty heavily with Behind a Closed Door.
Yeah.
It's a tricky thing because the technology is moving so fast. Like
Yeah.
something you write about today that seems fresh is going to be old news in 2 years.
Right. Yeah, you risked the Stieg Larsson thing. Like Girl in the Dragon Tattoo was full of references to like 90s era Apple technology and stuff, you know. So it dates it really, really hard.
Yeah, I watched a movie the other day. I forget what it was. It was Kevin Costner, and it was some kind of military thriller. But they were like taking a photograph and like recreating the pixels in this, and it took like 4 days for them to recreate this photo. That was the driver of the plot because he was trying to basically solve his problem before they figured out who was in this particular photo. But like in today's world, we could take that photo, put it on our phone, and enhance it. Like there's a
Yeah.
million like none of those things work anymore. Or like tracing a phone number, like
Yeah.
like it doesn't take 10 minutes anymore. You don't have to keep them on the line.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even the plot of Scream wouldn't work now because you know, there's that whole line of like, he's in, we traced it back to your house. He's in your house,
Yeah.
you
Well, yeah.
know?
I mean, I guess it could work. You could just make it the cell phone signal. I mean, there are
We used
ways.
find a friend, find my friend, or whatever
I
that
mean,
app
yeah,
is.
like I don't
And he's
know.
in your house. His Apple AirTag is in your house.
I
Yeah.
like to do the what's the worst thing that could possibly happen and like put it in the future. So a couple of my very first novel was that it was essentially what would happen if, just everything went crazy. What would the world look like in 300 years?
Yeah.
And then the book I'm writing or that I just wrote was the same thing. To
Yeah.
how would we end up with a water world? And then you think about what would that look like, and so it's grounded in actual things that are either happening now or are being developed now or things like that, but you wouldn't know it if you read the book. But I think that's kind of fun. I like
Yeah.
I like that in like fantasy and science fiction. That's fun.
Yeah. So she mentioned that she learned storytelling by reverse engineering the book she read. And I think all of us at some point have said we've done the
Yeah.
same or similar. But
Yeah.
are there any other like DIY methods for teaching yourself, crafting your own version of writing education that you've used?
Yeah,
Um,
reverse engineering is the best, I think.
I took the easy
yeah.
one off the board right away.
No.
I mean, the ones that I've taught when I was mentoring people, I would tell them to pick up a Stephen King short story collection and just highlight anytime he introduces a new character
Hmm.
because he creates a person in like 2 or 3 sentences, which is a crazy good skill to
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
One of the other things that when I had somebody that, just had a really hard time getting a novel started, I would have them read the first half of a novel and then close the book and then write the second half. Because now they've got the world, they've got the characters, they've got everything there. They just have to figure out, a story,
Yeah.
which gives them a good jumping off point.
That's an
There's a lot of
interesting
little tricks.
exercise.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
lot of little tricks like that. I worked with
Um,
one guy who was, he just did a lot of exposition. So I made him write a dialogue only novel. Like I basically made him write nothing but the dialogue to just kick it off as a first draft and then go back in and fill in the other parts later, to
yeah.
try and reverse what he had already been doing.
Was it you who had said to take like a show or a movie that you hated the ending of and redo it? Was that something that you had said, or did I hear that
I've
somewhere
heard
else?
that somewhere else, and I've told people to
Mm,
try that one too.
Yeah.
yeah.
TV shows are a great way to do that. And anything where it kind of establishes a lot of the benchmarks. You've got your world, you've got your characters, you've got their mannerisms. Like any one of us could probably sit down and write an episode of Friends if you've watched Friends.
Yeah, yeah, that would be
So,
kind of fun, actually. Yeah, Benjamin Franklin was pretty famous for he taught himself how to write by reading things that that moved him, and then trying to recreate them. And he was trying to recreate it word for word. So he would write it without looking at it as reference and then compare it. And then if he didn't get it right, he'd have to do it again. And he just kind of kept doing that and copying other work until his own skill became natural.
Yeah. Did you hear that he also, one of the things that he did, and I only remember this because I love this story because it just feels like so like petty, but not in a mean way. His brother owned a newspaper and wouldn't let him write for it. And so what he did is he created a customer, like Constance something, and would write, because, at the time, I guess they would publish like letters to the editor. And she was so popular that she ended up becoming a column, and his brother had no idea that it was actually Benjamin Franklin. And he had done that to try. And so he had said at some point somewhere to someone that got documented that it was a challenge because he had to disguise himself. So he had to think about who this person is and how would Constance think, and what would Constance, and that she actually became like a person to him, which I just think is hilarious.
Constance do good.
Yeah. And then he told his brother thinking he'd be impressed, and caused a rift that forced him to move to Philadelphia. And here we are.
The rest is American history. All right. Well, that's all the questions I got for you guys.
All right. JD, who's up next week?
Next week, we've got Joe Abercrombie coming on. Joe's a freelance film editor who worked on documentaries and live music events. He's also a New York Times bestselling author, and his latest is called The Devils, and it releases May 13th. That should be fun.
Nice. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode, and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.